Hey guys, it's Linux Next here. In today's video, we are going to be learning how to improve performance on the older hardware for gaming on Linux. And this video is mostly going to be important for the users that don't support Vulkan 1.3. As if you don't know, if your GPU doesn't support Vulkan 1.3, then translation layers like DXVK and VKD3D, which are important parts to gaming on Linux, really struggle or don't even work when you try to play games that utilize that, which is a lot of games on Linux. And in today's video, we'll be showcasing my 2015 Acer TravelMate laptop that I use for mostly media consumption. If we do switch over to another scene here, and then we have a look at the capture card, we do have it being captured from the laptop to a capture card. And if we take a look at what the specs on this laptop is, we can see it's an Acer TravelMate P236-M, and it has an i3 5005U processor, and it has Intel HD graphics 5500. So I'm going to be seeing if I can actually improve performance on this laptop and show you how you can improve performance if your GPU doesn't support Vulkan 1.3, or if you're just looking to gain that bit extra performance out of your hardware. Now, one great place that I found on the internet is a place called vulkan.gpuinfo.org, and it allows you to look up every single graphics card known to man, basically. And it's on, you can filter it to different platforms if you want to. So there's Windows, Linux, Android, macOS, and iOS. So for this case, we're on Linux, so we select the Linux, and then we can search up any GPU and see what Vulkan version is supported on that GPU. And it shows also the driver that was used when showing the Vulkan version. And when searching for Vulkan 1.2, we can see that there is a lot of GPUs that I bet a lot of people still are using in today's Linux gaming or Linux desktop experience. Now, thankfully for me, on my Acer TravelMate laptop, it already supports Vulkan 1.3. But the thing is that the Vulkan 1.3 support isn't that great, I would say, even on the latest MESA version. And that is basically because there isn't a lot of Vulkan extensions supported that are meant to be used for DXVK or VKD3D. So the extensions that those translations depend on, well, this GPU doesn't have those things supported. So the performance that I'm going to get out of DXVK or VKD3D might not be as great compared if I just played the game on Windows possibly. Now, looking up here, we can have a look at the DXVK driver support, and this will show the required, well, you need Vulkan 1.3, and you need some required Vulkan extensions for DXVK to perform rather well. Now, to check if your GPU actually does support these Vulkan extensions, either it be required or the optional Vulkan extensions, either you can use the Vulkan info in the terminal. I'm pretty sure you need a package which is called like Vulkan info. If not, comment down below what the package is called, or I'll just get my editor to show up what the actual package name is. It's kind of probably different on all different types of distros, but you can also grab LACT, which is available for like overclocking and all that, power profiling or fan curves. But it also does show you what Vulkan extensions are supported on the GPU. So if we do open LACT here, you can see there's an extension thing at the bottom here where we can click on this and it will show all the extensions that your GPU supports on whatever MESA version you are running. And then what we can do is, well, we can copy and, paste these into the search. And you'll see, okay, the Maintenance 5 Vulkan extension is supported on my RX 6700, or the Robustness 2 one. Well, that's supported also. Or the Transform Feedback. The majority of Vulkan extensions on here are going to be supported for me, unless it's an NVIDIA Vulkan extension that's required for like things like the Reflex feature in games. So for example, I have LACT installed on my laptop, and we'll go through these Vulkan extensions to see if it's supported. Like the majority of either the required or optional Vulkan extensions are supported on this rather old 2015 laptop. So for example, the Maintenance 5 Vulkan extension, as we can see, isn't supported. So there's one required Vulkan extension that isn't supported with DXVK on this GPU. When it comes to robustness 2, that is supported. And then when it comes to transform feedback, that is supported. So we have a couple of things that are supported on this laptop. But as we can see, maintenance 5, which is DXVK 2.5, relies on certain guarantees made by this extension, which may not hold true otherwise. So like I said, some games that I have tested on this laptop don't launch properly or have terrible performance. And we can have a look at some of the other ones that are available, like percent weight, which is required for proper frame latency control, which is supported. So that's really good. And then another one probably is the graphics pipeline, which isn't supported, which I noticed when I was trying to play some games under DXVK, and the game was really stuttery until all the animations were cached into the DXVK cache file, because, well, the laptop doesn't support the GPL or the graphics pipeline library, which allows you to load shaders when the game launches. So with my AMD GPU or with a NVIDIA RTX 2060 that I have, both of those support GPL and they can load that shader cache at the start of the game. Like games like Overwatch 2, for example, you'll see that happen where it will load the shader cache. That is GPL that is doing that for you, so then it can, you won't get as many stutters. But like I said, on this laptop, well, it's not supported. Now, if you are running a distro like Fedora or Arch, for example, well, you're pretty much okay when it comes to the MESA and kernel part. You don't need to run a newer MESA necessarily because your hardware is already old enough that you don't need like MESA Git or something to get like newer Vulkan extensions, because the chances of your hardware actually getting those Vulkan extensions supported is very low. But if you are on a distro like, let's say, Linux Mint, for example, or if you're on some Ubuntu-based, Debian-based like Linux Mint, or let's say Pop! OS, even though Pop! OS provides a newer MESA version usually, you can get a newer one through a repo that you can add to those distros. So for a newer MESA, I would recommend the Kiosk or Kisak MESA, if that's how you say it. And I've used this plenty of times when it comes to if I wanted to use an older distro and I wanted a newer MESA, and then also I would add a newer kernel, I would add this PPA. And as you can see here, there is some terminal commands that you're going to have to enter, which is really freaking easy to do. You just need to copy and paste these commands, which is sudo add apt repository. So you're going to add a repository, which is going to be the MESA repo, so you can get a newer MESA version. And you can do this in a GUI way. I know there's a GUI app on like Linux Mint where you can add repos, and on Ubuntu also you can add a repo just through a GUI, but this is really easy to do anyways as well. And then when it comes to getting a newer kernel, you can grab the Ubuntu mainline kernel installer, which I've also used before on Ubuntu based, or basically just Ubuntu based distros. And this website seems to provide a rather good step-by-step guide of how to install that kernel mainline installer. I've had issues before when trying to get this kernel mainline installer GUI, trying to find it because it's been like archived or something, so it's kind of hard to find it. But I think this one is rather new, so I would definitely try this out if you're on a Ubuntu distro, and then you'll be able to add and install a newer kernel for that distro. And then the last one, which I don't really recommend that much, but is to install a more custom kernel on Linux distros, either it be ZenMod or the Licorice kernel, or something like the Zen kernel on Arch, which is pretty safe to use, I would say. Zen's pretty safe. When I've been using it, I've had like no issues with it. But when it comes to like Licorice or the ZenMod kernel, where you're actually like boosting your CPU clock speeds, and it actually can introduce some bad things that could happen if your computer isn't well ventilated or something like that, where it's not cool enough. There could be some issues that could happen when using these custom kernels. But they are kind of a last resort if you want to squeeze out that bit extra performance out of the CPU that you're using. And of course, if you don't want to use a custom kernel, but you still want to use something that does have advantages, I would highly recommend that you check out distros like Kashi's OS or something like Nobara, where they have some extra patches applied to the kernel that could improve the performance on your CPU. And so what I said at the start of the video was about older GPUs that don't support Vulkan 1.3. How do we actually improve the performance on that, or at least try and get some performance gain or compatibility out of those GPUs? Well, one runner that you can use is Proton-Sarek. I think that's how you say it. And there's an async version available also. And the async version is the older way of a hack of how to load shaders in one go. It was highly used around 2 years ago, before GPL was a thing, and I remember using async on like Proton GE because you could use like an environment variable to get async on like an RTX 2060 or something, and it would load all the shaders in one go, and then the game would be as smooth as butter. But GPL is now available, so I don't have to really use async anymore. But for things like my laptop, for example, that doesn't support GPL, Proton-Sarek can improve that with async. And so you can grab this application called Proton Plus. This is the Flatpak version, so all I have to do is just go into the Discover store and search up Proton Plus and install it. Then you can select the game launcher that you are trying to inject that Proton runner into or install it into, and you can see there is Proton-Sarek and Proton-Sarek async. So when I said to check LACT, if your GPU doesn't support the GPL extension, then I'd highly recommend that you choose the async version of Proton-Sarek so that you can get those shaders to load at the start of the game. And just to show you what Proton-Sarek is, it says here, Sarek Proton for old Vulkan, a custom Proton build with DXVK Sarek for users with GPUs that support Vulkan 1.1 plus, but not Vulkan 1.3, or for those with non-Vulkan support who want a plug-and-play option featuring personal patches. Why does this repository exist? Because there are still users with GPUs that support Vulkan 1.1 plus, but not Vulkan 1.3, and others with non-Vulkan support. Those who can use DXVK often rely on older versions of Proton, which suffer from lower compatibility and performance compared to newer builds. Meanwhile, users dependent on YD3D often face a poor gaming experience. This repository provides patched versions of Proton and or GE Proton to try and solve these problems. This is done by using DXVK Sarek and added tweaks and parameters to Proton. And it says here, please be aware that this is a custom build of Proton. It is not affiliated with Valve's Proton. If you encountered any issues specific to my Proton build from this repo that do not occur with Valve's version, kindly refrain from submitting a bug report to Valve's bug GitHub. Instead, please report the issue directly on this GitHub. Thank you for understanding. So as you can see, this runner is meant to try and improve the Vulkan 1.1 or 1.2 or just GPUs that don't support Vulkan 1.3. And then when it comes to how to use Proton-Sarek, it's pretty easy. You just need to right click on a game, go properties, and then we want to go to compatibility and then use the force compatibility, which will select, you'll have a big list here where you can select Proton-Sarek. And then the last one we are going to look at is game mode, which is something that I don't personally use anymore on my main PC because I don't see an actual advantage when it comes to more FPS, mostly because I probably use Kash's OS, so that has its own type of things when it comes to optimization. But if we have a look at what game mode does, it's a Damium/lib library combo for Linux that allows games to request a set of optimizations be temporarily applied to the host and or game process. Game mode was designed primarily as a stopgap solution to problems with the Intel and AMD CPU power save or on-demand governors, but is now host to a range of optimization features and configurations. It says currently game mode includes support for optimizations including CPU governor, IO priority, process niceness, kernel scheduler or Schedule ISO, screensaver inhibiting, GPU performance mode for NVIDIA and AMD, and GPU overclocking NVIDIA, CPU core pinning or parking, and custom scripts. And literally like every single Linux distro you can think of includes game mode in their repo. So when it comes to installing it, it's really easy to do on whatever Linux distro you are running. And then if you do want to use it, we can go back to my laptop here. We can go properties on a game and we want to type game mode run. Of course, we want to have a % command % after that with a space, which will actually make game mode run actually run with the game that you are running. So what I decided to do around a week ago was test to see if my laptop can be improved with those things that I just showed you, either be Proton-Sarek, game mode, or the Licorice kernel. And if we have a look at Rocket League, this is a game that you can play on this laptop, I would say, with mediocre performance. I know my friend used to play it on this Acer laptop, and it wasn't necessarily amazing, but it got the job done. And if we have a look at the performance, like Licorice kernel with Sarek and game mode, we can see that it is able to do basically the best. And that is because my CPU is boosting another 100 megahertz. So I'm able to get just a little bit more performance out of the CPU, and as you can see, we can see the 1% min and the 97th percentile. It's doing a rather good job. When we look at Proton-Sarek, it seems to be performing the worst, which is really odd. I just went into training on Rocket League on a blank map and just kick the ball around, and as you can see, Proton-Sarek with game mode, it seems to be not performing that great, but with Sarek game mode and Licorice kernel, it seems to be performing really well. And then of course we can also see that Proton Experimental is doing just like, you know, an alright job, I would say. And another one that you can technically play under, which I force it under Proton, is Valheim. And if we have a look at the FPS here, we can see that actually Experimental seems to be doing a rather decent job, and same with Proton-Sarek with the async plus game mode, it seems to be doing a rather good job. While Licorice seems to be falling behind a little bit, especially on the, not on the 1% min, but when it comes to the 97th percentile, there could be margin of error. Most of these things I would say are kind of margin of error, not really. I would say still Licorice kernel seems to be performing better because it's forcing it that bit extra higher when it comes to its clock speeds. And another one, Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim. When we look at the performance here, Proton-Sarek game mode, 29 FPS minimum, 1% min, 10 FPS. When it comes to Proton-Sarek plus game mode plus Licorice kernel, it's kind of like alright, I guess, not really that great when it comes to the 97th percentile though. And then we look at Proton Experimental, it seems to be doing just an alright job, I would say. And then the last one is Deep Rock Galactic. That's another game that you can technically play on this laptop, and it's doing an alright job. When we look at Licorice with Proton-Sarek and game mode, 1% min, it's doing the best job, but when it comes to the 97th percentile, it's not really doing that great of a job. And that's why I kind of came to the conclusion after all of this that Licorice kernel probably isn't the best when it comes to running it on a laptop, and that's because, well, the laptop, you know, you got heat, and heat I think is the biggest problem here, where the laptop just overheats and then it gets downclocked, and then you lose that performance sometimes. Maybe if I turn it on for the first time and run those games, they'll be really good, but that won't last long because the CPU will get hot and then it will throttle itself. So at least for me on my Intel Acer TravelMate laptop from 2015, since it supports Vulkan 1.3, it doesn't support all the Vulkan extensions that are actually required for DXVK. We can see that this doesn't really matter for me, I would say. I could use just regular Proton Experimental, or I could use Proton-Sarek with game mode, but I probably wouldn't use Licorice kernel because well, it doesn't seem to be actually introducing a better performance overall, probably because I'm running on a laptop. But if you're running a desktop computer that has a GPU that doesn't support Vulkan 1.3, it's below, I would highly recommend using Proton-Sarek, and I highly recommend using game mode, and I'd highly recommend trying out Licorice kernel for a good amount of time to see if your CPU starts to like throttle or something. If it gets extra hot, you don't like that, then just use Proton-Sarek plus game mode and you should be able to see at least some improvements. But if your GPU does support Vulkan 1.3, then all you can really do is try and use that newer MESA version plus kernel, and just how you're going to have to deal with the problems and the performance issues that you may face with those GPUs that are from that like 2015, 2016, 2017 era. And the last one that I forgot to mention was about the NVIDIA GPUs. When it comes to anything from the 10 series or the 900 series, if you own those GPUs, when it comes to the VKD3D performance, it is not going to be great. So if you're trying to play DirectX 12 games, good luck trying to get good performance because it's missing a bunch of Vulkan extensions. And even when it comes to DXVK, it's going to be pretty all right, I would say. I'm pretty sure they support the majority of Vulkan extensions, but when it comes to DirectX 12 games, you're basically out of luck. You're going to get rather bad performance, I would say, if you're on those GPUs. If you're anything higher, like, you know, if you're using a RTX 2060 or any, you could say Turing or above GPUs, you will be good to go when it comes to playing those DirectX 12, even though the performance still isn't quite there because I'm guessing NVIDIA is trying to just improve the drivers here for DirectX 12 / VKD 3D. So we're going to have to see in the future if NVIDIA can improve the performance on that side. So that is the end of this video. I would say I'm sorry if the things that I provided didn't improve the performance on your GPUs. There's not much you can really do when it comes to like really getting the performance out of it because, well, it's kind of like you need to just buy newer hardware that supports the newer Vulkan extensions, that supports better, you know, like MESA support when it comes to getting newer Vulkan extensions or getting a newer Vulkan version like 1.4, for example, that is supported on a lot of GPUs now and will soon be used in probably those translation layers. I bet they'll start implementing those Vulkan extensions that rely on Vulkan 1.4, and those older GPUs are just going to get worse and worse, I would say. But if you guys did enjoy this video, definitely give it a like, definitely subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate it. And thank you to my supporters. I'll show a text across the screen. Thank you for giving money every single damn month. I really do appreciate it, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.